Back in 2016, my family and I did a little Easter event at my extended family's house when I was about 15 or so. Our extended family lived in upstate New York at the time while we lived in Georgia, so when they invited us to stay for Easter weekend, we didn't hesitate. Normally, my family wouldn't want to do that long of a drive, but we hadn't seen them in years, so we saw this as an opportunity. It's a very long and boring drive up there, but we make it within 2 days and we, kids, start to hang out with our cousins while the adults made dinner. We spent the first 2 days there with no problems, pretty much just enjoying ourselves and family. However, as soon as Easter Sunday approached, something happened that shook us all. That Saturday night, my mom had put my little sister to bed as we were planning on having this big breakfast tomorrow while also painting eggs as an early Easter activity. I'd say most of us were in bed by 9, except for me, as I always had trouble sleeping for some reason. Anyway, there I was moving around in my bed trying to find a comfortable position when I heard a weird noise. It sounded like what appeared to be glasses being moved around in the kitchen. Of course, I assumed that it had to have been my uncle sneaking a beer before going to bed. Being the dumb and daring teen I was, I figured I'd catch him in the act, as he never likes to be caught or called out for something he wasn't supposed to do. I carefully get out of bed and head over to the kitchen and turn the corner, where I saw a man I had never seen before going through our pantry. He immediately spots me and closes what appeared to be my aunt's medication she uses for sleep. He stares at me for a good few seconds while I just have this face of shock when he asks me who I was. I tell him, "Who am I? Who are you? And what the hell are you doing here?" He comes up with this half-assed story about how he stumbled into the house from the back door because his car broke down. Upon telling me his story, I could tell that this guy was seriously on some hardcore drugs as he was slurring his words and could barely keep a sentence straight. As terrified as I was, I tell him to please leave or that I would be calling the cops. However, he didn't seem to really care or even acknowledge what I was saying. He just turned away from me, digging through our food pantry, eating anything he could get his hands on. I ran to my uncle's room and told him that there was a man in the kitchen who I didn't know and that he wasn't leaving. I could tell that he was annoyed that I woke him up, but when he saw that I wasn't lying, he got out his gun and stormed into the kitchen like a madman. My uncle is not the type of guy to screw with, and he's yelling at this man to get out or he won't hesitate to shoot. This got the attention of my parents and my sister, who all came to see what was happening. My aunt immediately called the cops while my uncle and dad restrained him to the floor until the cops came. All the while, this guy is screaming his lungs out, trying to resist and make them let go of him. My aunt and mom stayed with my sister as she became visibly upset by this. Within a matter of minutes, the cops arrived and placed the man under arrest. Turns out, the story he had told me wasn't way off. He was driving home extremely wasted after a physical altercation with his brother who lived 2 towns over. This put a lot of stress on him, which caused him to crash into a tree down the road. He had come to our house looking for help as we were the only house with its lights still on. I remember the police asking my aunt and uncle if they wanted to press charges, but once they knew the whole story, they immediately felt sympathy and decided not to. He was detained and taken to some care center to get him treated as he still had insurance under his mom. The next morning, we sort of took things slow, but tried to make the best of it. However, this is definitely one Easter I won't forget. I just hope he's getting the proper help he needs.
The first time I ever celebrated Easter was only about 12 or so. For context, I'm a female, and this happened around 10 years ago, in my own town to be exact. It was Easter weekend, and my parents had told me my younger brother and I about this annual egg hunt for the family. We lived in a really small town at the time, and we supported the community in any way we could do, so the Easter event was something we didn't want to miss. The event would be held in a local park which had a big field, making it the perfect place to do an Easter egg hunt. Fast forward to Easter morning, we had breakfast and got ready for the event as it started at 12, and my mom wanted us to get there early. When we got there were so many families and friends who were also attending, and I could even see a few of the staff hiding eggs. If I remember correctly, the hunt started at exactly 12, and all kids were instructed to form a line accompanied by a parent. Being 12, my parents told me to stay by my brother and watch over him. I didn't mind that at all, as I liked to think of myself as mature and responsible. One of the staff members who was working the event blew the whistle and gave us the signal that the hunt had begun. Right away, a lot of kids started finding eggs left and right, which made my little brother visibly upset as he hadn't found any yet. Being the good and respectful big sister I gave him some hints and told him where some of the eggs were. This made him perk up a bit, which made me happy, as I wanted my brother to have a good time, and it wasn't fair that the other kids found a majority of the eggs. He thankfully found a few, and had a decently filled up basket within a short period of time. At this point, there were around 10 or so minutes left of the hunt, and my brother tells me that he wanted to go into a wooded area of the park. Before I continue, let me give you a layout of the park. The park was massive, and on the left side of it was this decently wooded area full of trees and vegetation. A lot of times people would use that area to smoke or drink, and it definitely was not a place for kids. I told my brother that there was probably no eggs over there, but he didn't seem to care and wanted to look just in case. After all, the rules never specified that we couldn't go over there, and so I told him that we would, but only for a few minutes. After some time, I realized we were going too far into it and that we should probably turn back. I tell him this, and he agrees, and that's when I notice an unpleasant smell. To be honest, it smelled like a dead animal and nearly made me puke. It was like being hit in the face with a compost bin. It was rotten and stale, and as I'm looking around trying to find the source of it, I finally looked to my right and saw it. About 15 feet or so away was a large black duffel bag sitting on the ground. The smell was definitely coming from that bag, and for whatever reason, I told my brother to stay put and approach the bag while covering my nose with my shirt. I got about 3 feet away from it, and that's when I noticed the bag had been opened and there was something sticking out of it that made me throw up right then. There's no real way to describe what you saw. It looked like meat, but it obviously wasn't. It still had skin. Obviously human skin. I don't really remember what happened next. I just grabbed my little brother and ran out of that area back to where everyone else was. At this point, my brother and I were clearly in distress, and my parents then confronted us about it. I calmly explained to them that there was what looked like flesh in the woods. Now, normally, my parents would dismiss it as animal, but their faces said it all, and they alerted the staff and security. Right away, this got the attention of many adults who started making their way over to the field, and the police weren't far behind. After that, my family and I basically got front row seats to see the whole circus unfold. People went into the field while parents stared and wondered. At this point, there were several police cars and press along the scene with some big police vehicle that read Crime Scene Investigation Unit on it. The entire field turned into a parking lot with what seemed like 50 people's cars swarming it. What I saw that day were the remains of a person. We were never told who it was or whether they were male or female. All I know is that it had to be someone from this town. Based on the skin that was still left on the body, I want to say it was female, but I'm not 100% sure. The cops questioned my brother and I as well as my parents, but we told them exactly what I'm telling you now. Rumors flew through town. The main theory was that it was a woman in her 20s who was having an affair with her boyfriend and that her boyfriend had killed her. Others claimed that it was actually a man and that there was a serial killer in the city who nobody knew about. Hell, there was even someone who claimed it was a man and who did this to himself as a publicity stunt. Either way, I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to. This experience was already shocking enough. What I do know is that it took a long time for the people in my town to recover from this. The last time anything close to this happening in my town was a potential homicide that took place back in the 50s. What had once been a nice, quiet, and friendly little community was shaken by something so violent literally happening in our own backyard. I'm 22 now, and I've been telling this story to friends and families for years. Neither my family nor I still live in that town, and I've since moved over 4 states away. I won't name the town for obvious reasons, but let's just say it's a town that not many people have heard about. I still have nightmares about this incident till this day, and always wondered if the person who did this was watching us in those woods somewhere. I'm not even sure if the authorities ever captured the killer through an investigation, but I like to think they did, which would have helped the town recover sooner. However, I knew there was probably a slim chance of that.
It was my first semester in college. I had just finished unpacking everything into my dorm, and my family had just left. For context, I'm a 19-year-old male, and I was just getting used to the college life. This happened on the weekend of Easter, I'd like to add, and I had a huge test the week after. The first few weeks of classes went well, and I actually made some decent friends who I got along with really well. One day, one of my professors, Mr. Shapiro, had informed the class about the test we had to take. I majored in chemistry, so I knew I had to hit the books if I wanted to ace this exam. One of my friends had told me about this little study room called the Stacks that many students weren't too familiar with. It was the simple room with a few bookshelves and multiple tables to read or do homework. Anyway, that night, I had left my dorm and brought my supplies down to the Stacks room to study. This was actually Easter Day, and my university was surprisingly open even though it was a holiday. Because of this, I had to cancel my Easter dinner plans with my family and sacrifice it to study. I of course hated it, but it is what it is, I guess. To my surprise, there was nobody in the room, which meant I could reserve it and have it all to myself. Long story short, I go in and start taking notes of what could possibly be on the exam. I repeatedly did this while listening to my music when I heard a weird noise. It sounded like a single knock hitting wood from somewhere in the room. Just to provide a quick layout, the stack room was about the size of a standard classroom, and there was nobody here who would have made that noise. I dismiss it as maybe a book falling and just focus on studying. Whatever it was, it didn't sound natural. It sounded as if someone was literally knocking on wood. I wander around the room, looking through the book aisles, trying to find out what it was. The only other room was a nearby vending machine room, and that room was small, so I knew it wasn't coming from there. However, I couldn't find anything and just went back to studying, trying to forget about the whole thing. It happened 3 times after that, but I just tried my best to ignore it. Even after ignoring it, I still heard it one last time, coming from right behind me. It startled me for a good second before packing up my stuff and leaving. I didn't even bother turning around to see who or what might have been there. I just got up and closed the door behind me. I still won't go back down in the stacks at night, even if I really needed a quiet place to study.